Yes, yes, thank you. I'm assuming we're good to go. Okay. All right. So we'll good to go. Thank you. We'll resume on affordable housing values. So if I could come to you first, Mr. Coote, just on this. So in the evidence supporting your representation, I think it's from Pathfinder, they argue that the affordable housing values assumed in the viability assessment are overly optimistic. But pages aren't numbered, but I'm looking at the bottom of the third page of their note. At the bottom of that third page, they give some examples of offers received from registered providers on schemes in Ormsby, Freethorpe and Martham. But those values suggest that the value assumed in the appraisal, 1,733 per square metre, is roughly in the middle of that range. So I would just wonder if you might care to explain that evidence a bit further, as it does seem to me those would support the figure used in the viability appraisal.
Apologies, I'm just referring to
That's okay. It's the letter on the pre-submission consultation, the Reg 19 consultation on the local plan.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, Pathfinder via affordable housing consultant.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what the point they're trying to make is that those mixes are more weighted in favour of shared ownership, and therefore you would expect a higher offer. What I would say, and I know this is not evidence that we've provided, but the conditions in the current market for obtaining even offers for affordable housing, we have a scheme currently in delivery whereby we can't even attract one delivery from one offer from an affordable housing provider. And we've been declined by all the local players.
Yeah. Why is that? Is that because of a crisis in funding for registered providers at the moment?
It's a combination of factors. Yeah, that they've not got the funding capacity. I think a lot of their funds have had to be diverted to upgrading existing property.
Yeah.
Because of the mold issue and so on and so forth. And then it comes down to their capacity in the program as well.
Yeah. Okay. I'll ask Mr. Trondheim just to comment on that at the moment. I mean, but I'm presuming that that's an ongoing issue for registered providers that the government is endeavouring to do something about. Just coming back to the point about those schemes being more heavily weighted in favour of shared ownership. So if we look at the scheme that achieved the highest value in Martham, I mean, that's probably a 2/3, 1/3 rented and to shared ownership. So it's not far apart from the 75-25% mix that's assumed in the council's policies, is it? So it's actually achieved 2000. I mean, it was July 2021, I accept, but it's a piece of evidence that's been provided by them. So, there are schemes which are achieving above that or have achieved above that level. So at the time the study was undertaken, 2023, it wouldn't be unreasonable to use that as evidence to support the figure that they have in the viability appraisal. It may be you can't say anything more on that, but I'm just looking at the evidence that's in front of me, really. That's and I'm just asking questions about that. Mr. Coote.
Yeah, I can't really offer anything in addition to that.
Okay. Mr. Drummond-Hay, do you just want to respond to that? And I don't know whether you can, in your response, say something about the current challenge for registered providers.
It's difficult. And Mr. Coote's quite right in saying what he's saying. And it is in part trying to deal with a backlog of damp, but also EPCs have to be raised for the existing stock. And the affordable sector is diverted on dealing with other problems. I did talk to the council about this and how about some of the government initiatives on this, and Mr. Fountain might have to jump in and sort of metaphorically kick me under the table if I get this wrong. But in those instances where this is a council that wants to see development come forward, and the last thing it would want to see is development held up because a buyer couldn't be found for a parcel of affordable housing. And in those instances, they would certainly be open to a discussion about commuted sums.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that's quite careful wording. They would be open to it. They're not going to agree to it now, but they certainly appreciate the challenges in the sector at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's very much in line with what's happening more centrally on this.
Yeah. Okay. And I think I'm right. I don't know, it's Mr. Fountain or Mr. Ball's thing, right, in recalling that your affordable housing policies allow for off-site contributions if on-site can't be provided.
Yeah, thanks, Inspector. Yeah, no, that's correct. Policy HAU1 affordable housing, does allow off-site commuter sums to be provided if there's exceptional circumstances exist. So obviously, I think there's flexibility in that policy wording that we consider. We'd be open to consider that under that consideration.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So move on to external works now. Nothing further to ask on affordable housing issues. So again, if I can come to you first, Mr. Coote, on external works. In your representation, you argue that the allowance for external works of 15% of base build costs in the appraisal and the viability appraisal is inadequate, and you argue that it should be 40 to 50% of the base build costs. And you've given a number of schemes to support that. Just bear with me. Find the relevant document. So the council responded then to that evidence following the local plan hearings. So that was they responded in writing, document H59. It was a note on viability matters, including external works. So in that, they looked at the examples that had been provided by Badger Building, and they've shown that the examples that you've given in your evidence use a much lower base build cost. So hence external works are a much higher percentage. So just wondering how you respond to that. On the face of it, that would appear to explain why the percentage in those examples is much higher. Yeah, Mr. Coote.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously historic data. Cost bases have risen significantly over the last 5 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
That some of that data precedes that time period. Some of it is captured, but it's all relatively early within that time period. It also doesn't account for, you know, the lead flood now. I think the technical requirements in terms of SUDs, highways, infrastructure, I mean, utilities, electricity, water, sewage, those costs are disproportionate now compared to where they were.
Yeah.
I mean, we've just had, I mean, the two authorities, water authorities that operate in this area are Anglian Water and Essex and Suffolk Water. They have just introduced new charging schedules. Their infrastructure element only is increasing by 50%.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I appreciate that consultants have to use the data that's available, which is the BCIS. I'm a former consultant myself, so I've relied on that in many instances. It is flawed because it's historic and it's only data that is voluntarily offered, so it quite often doesn't reflect the true market conditions, but I accept it's what's available and therefore has to be used.
It's the published source, and it is the source recommended in the PPG, isn't it? So
it is very historic though.
Okay. Just give me a moment. I'll just remind myself the figures set out in your evidence. Yeah. And there are some elements of so if I look at the figures on the second page of RUA construction consultants evidence that you've provided in your representations, so there are some elements of those additional costs on top of base build costs, which are in elsewhere in the viability appraisal. So things like marketing agents fees are included in those percentages, aren't they? But actually, those are accounted for in the viability appraisal. So the elements that you're saying are much greater than a 15% external works allowance would provide for, are things like adoptable roads, sewers, drainage, plot drainage, so on and so forth, utility connections. And you're saying in particular, because the costs of the utility providers have gone up significantly over the last couple of years, and there are additional infrastructure costs required as part of a sustainable drainage solution to sites now. in a nutshell, I think that's what you're saying. It's those elements really that you're saying haven't been adequately reflected in the external works allowance.
You did break up at the start there, but I
Oh,
think
sorry.
yeah.
Might have been because I was looking away. Let me just put that in front of me. Yeah, what I was saying is the figures provided. So I'm looking at RUA consultants, construction consultants, evidence that's it as part of your representation. And on the second page of their letter, they list a number of attached to their letter, they list a number of schemes, and these are the ones which are using a lower base build cost. But just within that, there are some allowances within the what they say are additional or external costs, which are already factored into the viability appraisal elsewhere. So things like design, planning, building control fees, marketing agents fees, so on and so forth. So those are dealt with elsewhere in the appraisal. So in a sense, the figures I'm really looking at are what you're saying are a more realistic estimate of the costs for external works, including roads, sewers, drainage, landscaping, utility connection services.
Yeah.
So those are the things to focus on. Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Drummond-Hay, could you just kind of respond to that? So there has been, Mr. Coote saying those examples given are historic anyway, and base build costs have increased considerably in the last few years, as well as external works costs, infrastructure costs. To what extent does the viability appraisal allow flexibility for those increases in cost over time?
Dealing with that very last point first, the viability appraisal is carried out at December 2023 costs and values.
Yeah.
We make no, although we've undertaken sensitivity testing on price changes, we're not trying to predict the future, because if we did, we'd be wrong. There are two exceptions in relation to that. First of all, it was flagged and highly likely that the future home standard was going to be introduced. So we embedded the cost of that within our study. And also it was highly likely that we thought it was highly likely that M42 accessible and adaptable standards would be mandated nationally for all new houses. So we included that in the cost. Actually, we're wrong on that, because under the NPPF consultation, they're only going to mandate it for 60% of affordable, of all houses. So we've tried to take into account and anticipate cost changes. I think part of the issue around this is comparing apples and pears, and it's important to note that the 15% site cost is of the construction cost. So we start with the BCIS, which at the time of the study was £1,389 a square metre, and then we adjusted it up to £1,437 by the time we'd adjusted for the future home standard, water accessible and adaptable, and the other policies within there. So our 15% is a 15% of a higher figure. I'm not going to try and compare sort of specific numbers from different appraisals, because we'll just go round in circles on that. The other point that I would like to make is just take you to table 3.1 of our study, which was a review of viability appraisals that have been submitted through the development management system.
Just let me get there, would you? So table 3.1, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we anonymized. So these are just figures taken from development appraisals submitted through the DM process. And the PPG suggests that we should draw on the widest available evidence, including existing viability studies.
Yeah.
These were anonymized for the report, but I am going to tell you, the metaphorical kick might come under the table, that all 4 of these were prepared by Pathfinder.
Yeah.
All 4 of them used, 3 of them used site costs of either 10% or 12%. 2 of them were based on the BCIS median cost and 1 on the mean cost. And our figures, the figures that we've used, are very much they're a higher cost than those. The use of the BCIS median cost was a result of the consultation. We suggested for the larger sites of over 100 units, we should be using the lower quartile cost. Various people, including Badger Building and others, suggested that that wasn't appropriate. And within the report at figure 7.1 on page 98, we looked at the distribution of costs, how they varied on different sites.
Just let me get there. Yeah, okay.
And we used some median cost.
Yeah.
I think when you look at it in the round, having particularly what's come forward from developers through the development management system, we are taking an appropriate approach here.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that some sites will have higher costs, and they're abnormal costs, and those should be reflected in the benchmark land value as per the PPG.
Okay. Mr. Coote, did you want to come back on that at all?
No, I accept everything that Mr. Drummond Hay says. You know, you have to work with the tools you're given.
Okay.
I mean, I'm actually in favour of CIL. It gives developers certainty. So I'm not here to make waves. As the only external participant, it would seem in most consultations that the borough undertake, it's because we want to deliver. However, we need to be able to deliver viable developments, and that's the only reason we're here.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for that. Okay, we'll just deal with benchmark land values, if that's okay. Just move on to that. Again, Mr. Coote, if you don't mind, if I can just come to you first on this. So in your representations, I'm just trying to remind myself where it was. Yeah. there was a couple of things you say. One is that you say that the land values used in the benchmark land values used in the local plan viability appraisal are not set at a level which mean landowners would agree to sell. So that's the first point. But you also say that the appraisal doesn't check the assumed benchmark land values against market evidence. So I did delve into the appraisal to check that, and I think it's table 6.2, if I'm right. It's table 6.2 in the appraisal, which is on, it's on page 88 of the appraisal. that did seem to compare or check the benchmark land values against a list of price paid values for sites. So yeah, I just wondered if you wanted to respond to that first, and then perhaps I just wondered if you have any alternative evidence on what, well, in your representations, on what landowners are willing to agree to sell if you don't consider the benchmark land values are set at an appropriate level. Yeah.
I mean, without referring specifically to the various benchmark land values that are indicated on the various options of the appraisals, it was apparent to us when comparing the benchmark land values to option agreements in terms of minimum land values that are specified in there and what market expectation is that in the majority of instances the landowners would just not be prepared to pay to accept the level of offer that the benchmark land value would generate.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, landowners all have unrealistic expectations. Don't get me wrong. However, you know that they deal that there's no reason for them to come forward with a site if they don't get what they consider to be fair value.
Yeah.
And again, that's just about delivery, particularly in regards to allocated sites.
Yeah. So as I understand it, the values in the appraisal are, again, because it's a high level strategic appraisal, they have to take an average approach, but the values assumed for greenfield sites are existing use value, on brownfield sites are existing use value plus 20%, but on greenfield sites, existing use value plus 350,000 per hectare. So on the face of it, that would seem to be a reasonable assumption on greenfield sites, or indeed 10 times existing use value on strategic sites. And I think the existing use value of greenfield was about 25,000 per hectare. So on the face of it, that would, just looking at other viability appraisals elsewhere, that would seem to be not an unreasonable assumption for a benchmark value to test appraisals against compared to existing use values, given that the PPG does say, existing use value plus is the approach you should take to benchmark land values. So yeah, I'm just what is the issue with those figures? I understand that perhaps they don't necessarily reflect the values achieved on all all pieces of land that have been sold recently. I can see there are some differences in values on the sites in table 6.2, but that approach appears to be in line with the PPG and making a reasonable allowance above existing use value for landowners to at least secure a price that would be incentive enough for them to sell.
I disagree. It's difficult for me to make a direct comparison because we always do it on a per plot basis. So without sitting here and doing some figures, because I don't have the information to hand, but if we're saying that it's 25,000 plus 350,000 per hectare, we're then saying that under this assumption 70% of that is net developable. We're down at between around £15,000 a plot. That's just not acceptable. You'd expect an affordable housing provider to pay almost that amount for a purely affordable housing development. Sort of 10 to 12,000 a block they would normally pay.
Okay. Mr. Drummond-Hay, would you mind just responding to that point? So effectively, you know, what you've assumed there in the viability appraisal really doesn't reflect you know, what landowners would reasonably expect in the marketplace.
I'm almost tempted to be slightly out of character and not say anything on this, because you summed up what I'm going to say quite concisely before you asked that question. This is really the only difficult part of the viability study to do, and we're broadly in line with what happens elsewhere. And I think you summed it up very concisely, more concisely than I would have done.
Okay, well, just repeat back to me what I said.
Okay, so the challenge for these studies is, so we're required to use the EUV plus, and in that, for the larger sites, the largest sites, the strategic sites, we have used a lower benchmark land value of EUV times 10, where the EUV is £25,000 per hectare, because those larger sites generally have higher infrastructure costs, and the guidance says that those higher infrastructure costs should be reflected in the benchmark land value. It's really critical to I am involved in some development myself. I understand why Mr. Coote would work on a per unit basis, and that is one of the ways that anyone would look at benchmark, would look at the amount to bid for land. With the benchmark land value, we are looking at the whole site area, both the net area and the gross area. And a lot of the figures that are quoted in options are often per net developable area, not always. And if you look at the blurb from the big agents saying how brilliant they are at selling development land, almost always those values are quoted on a per net developable area. So they can be up to, well, on very large sites, not at the scale that you'd find here, but you might only have 50% net developable area. If I could take you back to that table 3.1, which was development appraisal submitted through the development management process, on page 37, the benchmark land values that were put forward through development management are, well, one of them is exactly in line with the assumption that we've used. The others are a bit more. Without going into the detail, these are smaller schemes, or those are smaller schemes. It's difficult to draw comparisons. As Mr. Coote said landowners will always want more and
Yeah.
say they want more. I think having checked these against market transactions, I'm broadly comfortable with where we are on them.
Yeah.
And this approach is certainly in line with the current consultation on the draft MPPF and PPG.
Go on. Yeah. Although it's only draft at the moment, isn't it? So it's not likely to be in place by the time the report's done. So.
No, but I'd like to feel that we're not completely out of the loop, and it's a bit like with reflecting the future home standard. We've been told it's going to be coming for donkey's years, but we're just keep an eye on what's going on more broadly.
Yeah, and just ask one sort of factual question. In that table 6.2 that I think I referred to, is it page 88 of the appraisal, which is price paid for consented development land. Are those per hectare figures? Are those net or gross?
Gross.
Those are gross. Okay, so they are comparable to the. You can compare those with the BLVs assumed in the report. Yeah.
Yeah, but those do include some which are not policy compliant, which we're told to disregard, and they include some which are 100% affordable housing, which I would also give little weight because we're talking about market housing here.
Yeah, I think you've said that, haven't you, in the your in the text below or above? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right, Mr. Coote, before I move off of the benchmark land values, is there anything else you want to say on that?
No, I've said all I can.
Sorry, Mr. I was asking Mr. Coote actually if there was. Thank you for Mr. John Hay. Yeah, Mr. Coote, is there anything more you want to say just on BLVs before we move off that? I'm going to move on to discussing the residential rates.
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So we'll go on to talk about the residential rates now. And I suppose this is around questions 3 to 11 in our main issues and questions. So again, grateful to the council for your responses to those questions 3 to 11. So this is about the CIL rate for residential development. So as we understand the viability appraisal assessment, the proposed CIL rate of £80 per square metre for residential development would allow margins of viability on greenfield sites of between 50 and 75% of the surplus of residual land value above benchmark land value. That's a very, very rough understanding of the evidence I think that you presented in the respective tables and appendices. So looks like there are margins of viability on those greenfield sites of between 50 and 75% of when you use the test of residual land value above benchmark land value, and when considering the additional profit test as well. Yeah, but that's not the case for flatted schemes and brownfield sites. So those are the things I think we need to discuss further, and indeed whether the DCS should be modified to reflect the results without necessarily overly complicating the DCS. Mr. Drummond, you did have your hand up there. We're happy for you to speak at that point if you wanted to. Were you going to correct me on something?
Well, I just wasn't quite sure what you said. You said something between 25%
50 and 75% margin. Allow for viability margins of 50 and 75% when you compare residual land value above benchmark land value. Yeah.
Okay, that's yeah.
Just bear with me, so that I'm not just plucking figures out of the air. Yeah. I'll take you to the relevant tables, and then you can tell me whether I'm misreading it or not. I think it's table 10.8A. Yeah. So 10.8A. So that's on page 152 of the report. So all I'm doing there is, I think that's the additional profit test, isn't it? That's showing a surplus of anywhere between, on greenfield sites, this is anywhere between £37 per square metre for the Nova Scotia farm site, which actually is proposed to be zero rated anyway. But if you take those that are proposed to receive a charge, I think it's anywhere between £172 and £313 per square metre surplus, as I understand it, when you use the additional profit test. And all I'm doing is saying, well, £80 per square metre is anywhere between 25 and 50% of those surpluses. I think that's the figure I've assumed you're working from. And then the other on residual value over benchmark land value is actually in Appendix 18 of your appraisal.
Yeah. You're correct on that, definitely.
Okay. And so it's small on my screen, but again, if we go for, yeah, it's on page 250 of the report.
Yeah.
So again, there, just you're saying that, I mean, that's really the conventional way of testing viability testing, which I've seen lots of before.
I think you're looking at page 251.
Oh,
I think you should. I think you're.
It should be on page
251 when you made your notes.
Oh yes, okay, yes, yeah. That's it. Spot on. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. That's that is the table indeed that I looked at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and basically that's showing there that it was the previous table actually. So essentially that seems to be showing, if I go to the previous table on page 250, that seems to be showing that if I just look at the greenfield sites and where the greens are, the green colours are, which indicate a surplus, most but not all sites, typologies, greenfield typologies, if we look at the £160 per square metre CIL rate column, to me there most appear to be able to support that. So actually an £80 per square metre figure, is clearly viable for all of those, but actually a higher figure could be. So I think that's what those sort of figures I'm working from, really. Yeah. And I'm drawing those conclusions. Yeah. So it seemed to allow sort of marginal buffer of between 50 and 75%. Is that my reading those tables correctly?
You're reading those tables correctly.
Okay.
But can I just talk you through the process we went through?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
it does have a number of steps in it.
Yeah.
We started off by doing the additional profit, and the additional profit is something that we as a consultancy came up with back in 2010 when CIL was all new and exciting, and it was about how do you decide how to share the amount over and above the benchmark land value that is left. Over time, I have become less convinced by it. There was and I'm desperately trying to rack my memory of the name of the appeal down at Reading University, which was about sharing the uplift from a planning consent between the developer and the local authority, or the landowner and the local authority. When the PPG was updated in 2018, it seemed to be it didn't fit as well with the PPG. So while we still present it, because some of your colleagues expect that type of analysis to be presented, I think that really the additional profit is most useful simply to identify if there is scope for CIL. And I wouldn't put too much weight on trying to apportion that amount between the landowner and the local authority. We then, as you were looking at on page 250, took the policy compliant development and ran it with different levels of CIL, and that suggested that a rate of about £160 per metre squared would be viable on most sites when tested strictly as per the MPPF and the PPG. Your colleague Keith Holland, sitting as CIL examiner just down the road in Norwich, who's a child surveyor, so comes at this from a slightly different angle to some other planning inspectors. Just different, not better or anything, but they had a long discussion about how much should a landowner be prepared to accept in a fall as a fall in land value from a new levy. And Keith picked out in his personal style this figure of 25%. It sort of fell out of the discussion. And so we've always applied that as an upper limit, that CIL shouldn't be result in a fall in land value of more than 25%.
Yeah. And
that reduced the rates of CIL from £160, the maximum rate of CIL, from £160 to £80. Strictly speaking, under the PPG test, the EUV plus methodology, £160 per metre squared is probably okay. But I am convinced that would unsettle the market and would be a real drag on development. The fourth test is a very sort of small test and doesn't bite here, is that all these development appraisals are assumptions building on assumptions building on assumptions, and we have contingencies, and they're all done in a slightly odd way as prescribed by the MPPF, but by the PPG. And so we always say that CIL should be a small proportion of the scheme value. And in this case, at £80 a metre squared, as shown on page 252, it would be less than 3%. Normally we say a 5% target. In this case, it would always be less than 3%. So there was one thing that I omitted to say, and that was when we were doing the EUV plus testing in as set out on page 250, In that we had increased the benchmark land value by 30% for the cushion or buffer that is referred to in the CIL guidance in the MPPF. So we've set a higher threshold for when it comes to setting CIL. And to some extent, that is why we've ended up suggesting a lower rate of affordable housing in the local plan to create capacity for CIL, because we need to have this buffer in there as well.
Okay. So it's a 30% buffer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now that's very helpful. I'm pretty certain.
I think that's what you said, but I said it differently.
No, that's very helpful just to be reminded of those different approaches. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Could we just go on to talk about flatted schemes and brownfield sites? I think those are the two. And we have asked questions about those in our matters, issues, and main issues and questions, haven't we? I'm grateful for the council's responses to those. Just looking at flatted development, I think in your reply you've indicated a willingness to consider a modification to the draft charging schedule to zero rate all flatted development, which I think we would agree is a necessary change. Partly because I think we're just aware that just to ensure that that form of residential development isn't put at risk. And I think we're just conscious that perhaps a number of the key urban regeneration sites, waterfront sites, may depend quite heavily on flatted development as the main form of development. So I think you've indicated a willingness to do that. I think for those reasons we would say that's necessary to ensure residential development from that source isn't put at risk. I think you just queried how flatted development would be defined. So I don't know whether you had anything to add to that. The CIL examination process is different to local plans in that there isn't a main modifications stage, and in our report, if we're recommending a change, we wouldn't necessarily specify the detailed wording of that. So I think it's probably something that we would be content to allow the council to define, but I think it would be helpful to just discuss a form of words here, if that's possible. What were your doubts over being able to define that accurately? Was that yourself, Mr. Drummond-Hay? I wasn't sure.
Well, I think what I would like to say to start with is to have a zero rate on flatted development would be consistent with the viability evidence.
Yeah,
and that's an important point. I'm a chartered surveyor, not a planner, and I would say flatted development is, you know it when you see it. But that might be too simple. I think in other CIL charging authorities certainly do just use do describe flatted development as flatted development and non-flatted development, so that there would be that differentiation. The only in Canterbury, where it just springs to mind because we're doing some work there at the moment, they have said schemes that are 100% flatted development would be zero rated for, or are zero rated for CIL, and they've been adopted for many years, and it's never caused any problems. But I think that's over to Mr. Fountain, who's a planner, not a chartered surveyor.
Okay. I mean, I would think if it's a zero rate for flats, that would apply whether it's a mixed scheme or a 100% flatted scheme, because then if you're allowing a rate to be charged for flats in a mixed scheme, there's a degree of cross subsidy from housing to flats, and I'm not sure you have the evidence to support a a rate for flats in a mixed scheme, as far as I can understand anyway, from the typologies you've tested. So,
Well, can I just check very quickly something on that, because you might have that in front of you. So on a housing scheme, where platted development came along, it would probably, Mr. Coot might be able to help on this, it would probably be in, you might have 4 flats in what looks like as a single block. So it'd be 2 stories, and it would just be 4 flats. And the cost of doing that, you don't have the circulation space because you, everyone has got their own front door in effect. Within Nova Scotia Farm, which just comes up first on my appraisals, we did assume that 5% of the market housing would be flatted development.
Okay. But that's on Nova Scotia, and that's subject to a 0 rate anyway.
It is. And some of the larger sites, we also assumed that there was an element, but not very much. I mean, it's not something to get hung up on.
Okay. Does council have a view on the definition? I'm not sure who it was within your team that expressed some doubt about how it's defined, but it seems to me it is relatively straightforward just by referring the DCS to residential development except for flatted schemes, or indeed listing flatted residential development as a separate category with a 0 rate would be a way of doing it.
Yeah, I thank you, Inspector. I think we would be agreeable to that. I think in response to question 6, it just said all flatted development brackets defined accordingly. So I think we can look at the guidance around that and the evidence that's out there already to come up with a suitable definition that we.
So you would suggest the wording all flatted development defined accordingly.
Well, I'm going to interrupt on that. I would just say all flatted development, full stop.
Yeah, I think I would too.
Yeah. I think that's what I intended. But yeah, I think I was just reflecting the words within the response to the hearing statement. But yeah, I think we can agree to that definition.
Okay. All right. Well, that's straightforward. That's something we can take away. With regard to brownfield sites, so we note the council proposes including allocated brownfield sites within the urban areas within zone 2, which is 0 rated, which I think we agree the evidence leads you to that. That's consistent with the evidence. And we've asked a question around whether all brownfield development should not be 0 rated. I think we've so in reading your response, we note the reasons for not doing that. You're not wanting to do that, let's say, because policy OSS 5 allows planning contributions on brownfield sites to be reduced. That having been said, if the results of the appraisal show that all brownfield development cannot viably support a CIL charge, should the DCS not reflect that in exempting brownfield development from CIL, so effectively 0 rating residential development on brownfield sites?
Yeah,
Mr. Drummond, yes, or Mr. Hadley. I'm not sure who's going to answer that.
I think Mr. Hadley.
Okay.
Yeah. So just briefly, just to set out that position, I know it's within the hearing statement, but at the time of drafting that DCS, the council wasn't relying upon a windfall development to meet its housing requirement across the plan period, and therefore only allocated sites were 0 rated. That's the approach we took in drafting the schedule. We said about policy OSS 5 providing that mechanism for review, and that we hadn't incorporated it within the funding gap calculations within the funding, though we didn't rely on any windfall receipts when calculating that funding gap. And the other
Okay.
element to that was around the exemptions within Regulation 40 and vacant building credit that might allow a reduction in the CIL chargeable area from from those exemptions. So that's the reasons why we didn't propose to include other brownfield sites within Zone 2.
Yeah.
I think just to sort of anticipate where you're going on this, I think on the basis of the viability evidence and the sort of the inclusion of the windfall allowance within the local plan, that you may be minded to recommend that Zone 2 includes brownfield land within the urban area. So we have anticipated that potentially all brownfield sites, not just allocated sites within Zone 2, but we could broaden that definition to include brownfield sites within the built-up urban area. And we have sort of prepared a map that shows that potential widening of Zone 2 to incorporate the built-up area. So if it would be useful to introduce that at this point or during the break between sessions, or alternatively following the hearing session, then that's something we would be open to considering based on that viability evidence.
Okay. Do you think it needs to be defined by a zone? Could you not simply classify brownfield site across the brownfield residential development on brownfield sites across the borough? I appreciate perhaps haven't necessarily, well, I'm not sure whether the urban infill typologies that test that are necessarily restricted to the main urban area of the borough, or whether actually those typologies would apply in any of the settlements across the borough.
So Mr. Drummond, they can advise on that particular.
Mr. Drummond, yeah.
I think could we have a word with that over about that over lunch, about the best way to do it? There is certainly a clarity of having something on a map that developers can look at. The CIL zones are clearly defined on a plan. Equally, the definition, there is scope to use the definitions now. Originally, there wasn't under the early CIL regs. Could we come back to you after lunch on that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what I'm asking is, does the evidence allow you to define an area? I'm not sure it does, because I'm not sure your typologies have been limited to a particular area of the borough. I think, I understand you've chosen in your draft charging schedule, you've chosen to define Zone 2 as only those brownfield sites that are allocated, but in that windfall is likely to include brownfield sites across the borough. I'm not sure I see a justification in the evidence to simply define a zone for brownfield development which is limited to the principal urban areas of the borough.
I think I would so the brownfield sites, the borough is quite a cleanly defined area with urban areas and rural areas, and I think the urban area, that the brownfield sites are really only going to come forward within the urban areas, just because there are very few beyond that. I was just quickly having a look at the beginning of table of chapter 9. We did just consider the distribution of the HELAR sites, and it's not very helpful in telling you anything. Okay. I would say that the brownfield greenfield site is a good proxy for the urban area and non-urban areas.
Right.
but you might not agree.
Yeah.
We do have a map.
You do have a map already.
Yes.
And is that, well, just without showing the map at the moment, is that what is the area that's defined? Is it Great Yarmouth, Gorleston, Bradwell?
Yes, it's around the built-up areas of Great Yarmouth, Gorleston, and Bradwell, excluding some of the greenfield parcels to the south of Bradwell. So it broadly follows the development limits around those settlements.
Yeah. So it doesn't include any of
Bradwell.
the rural settlements in that, where there may well be brownfield windfall sites coming forward.
No, it doesn't. I would just say, with evidence from the Healer and what we've seen previously, there are very few brownfield land parcels within the rural area that would likely be captured by zone 2. That's what the evidence we've got within the Healer. There are a limited number, but as Mr. Drummond said, we expect most of the brownfield development to occur within the urban area.
Yeah. Okay. Right. That's fine. You can have a little think about it over the lunch break. But I think, anything you put to us by way of a map would be for us to consider in our final report. There wouldn't be any further to and froing on that, and it may well be we look at that and take the view that it should not be geographically restricted. So I think if you want to put a map to us, it might be helpful to put it with a statement justifying why the 0 rating of brownfield development should be limited to those areas. Yeah, I mean, you referred to the type of sites coming forward in the HELAR, that very few of those are within rural villages. So I think some sort of summary and pointers to where that is in the HELAR evidence would be helpful if that's the approach that you want to take. I think I'm skeptical, but I think we're happy to take that and have a look at it and deal with it in the report. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. I think we can reflect on that, and
I'm just conscious Mr. Coote is here only for this session, and I don't want him to be denied an opportunity to comment on something which you want us to accept. So I think we're saying we're not accepting anything at the moment. We're just saying council to take that away, give it some thought, send that back to us. It would obviously be published, and we would give some consideration to that as part of our report. Yeah. So rather than having a further discussion about it this afternoon, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Coote, is there anything? I'm not sure whether your company deals with a mix of brownfield and greenfield sites or not. Anything you wanted to say on that exchange?
We have done, we will do brownfield, but not predominantly greenfield, to be honest.
You do predominantly greenfield or not predominantly?
Predominantly greenfield, yes.
Predominantly greenfield. Okay.
That being said, we have redeveloped a few school sites, but the vast majority of that tends to be the playing field. So
yeah. No, I understand that. Okay, all right. I think we'll do that. So if council take that away, if you come back to us with if you consider it should be limited to an urban zone, then I think we're happy to look at a map, but it needs some explanation as to justify that. Okay, thank you. From my perspective, I think we're almost there. I've got one question on. Sorry, just wanted to pick up tourist and holiday accommodation because we've asked a question on that, and I also just want to follow up on your response to question 11, our question 11 on zonal maps. So, oops. Okay. So just in respect of tourist and holiday accommodation, so we asked a question 9. Is it clear whether or not the proposed CIL charge of £80 per square metre would apply to tourist and stroke holiday accommodation, including holiday caravans, holiday chalets and lodges, and have those types of residential accommodation being tested in the viability appraisal? So in response, you've said, yeah, I think having read your response on that, I think we're content that the draft charging schedule does make it clear that the residential rates apply to C3 and C4 residential uses, and that caravans would be exempt anyway, and that other C3 holiday lets would be similar to residential properties in terms of their development economics. So I think we're content that that doesn't need any further testing or any further exemption clauses. So I think we're satisfied with that. And then on terms of zonal maps, we just asked whether those were accurate enough or at a large enough scale to be able to establish whether a site falls one side or other of a zonal boundary. So again, thank you for your response to that. I think we're satisfied that the maps are legally compliant in that regard. So they include the OS grid references, which you've included as part of your modification statement, and there's an interactive map as well that allows you to zoom into boundaries, so you can make a detailed assessment as to where a site falls. So again, I think we're satisfied that what's in there is legally compliant. Ultimately, the DCS will be an electronic document that developers can interrogate. So we have no further questions, unless Mrs. Burston, you have anything you want to ask at this stage?
No, I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Any final comments from either Mr. Coote or the council on residential rates before we leave that? No. Wonderful. Okay, so just if we can just recap any agreed actions, if that would be helpful. I think just going through. So I think the first one from this morning was the council's going to add its opening statement to the website. Yep. And provide us with a copy. Then under infrastructure funding, you were going to prepare a note for us on funding from other sources. That's the summary I made, but essentially it was about, and I think it'd be helpful to put this into an action list. Sorry, we should have said at the beginning, we can just, as we did with the local plan examination, if we can just agree an action list between us and allow that to be published, that'd be helpful. Mr. Balls, yeah, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Inspector. Yeah, it was just in terms of action 2 about the funding sources. Would it be appropriate to define a scope in terms of time length, how far we go back? We're considering maybe 5 years would be consistent with how we've approached the infrastructure funding note, looking backwards rather than going back 10, 15 years or so.
Yeah.
Would 5 years be appropriate?
I think 5 years would be fine. I think that would be probably the most relevant period to look at. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I think if you do a note on add that to the action list, we'll just have a look at the action list, and if we think the brief for it. Sorry, my screen keeps on switching off. I hope I'm not switching off. It's just when I'm not touching the mouse. So okay. Yeah, we'll have a look at the note when you've with the action list when you've drafted that, and if we think it needs any more clarity, we can do that. So I think that was all at that stage. Yeah, I think the council has confirmed its willingness to support a zero rate for all flatted developments. I think we've noted that. I don't think that needs to go on the on the action list. That's something we will take away and consider. But then in respect of brownfield sites, you've agreed to prepare a map of the urban zone that you think that should be applied to, but also with an explanation as to the basis on which that should be defined, and why it shouldn't include, or why brownfield development shouldn't apply to, the 0 rating of brownfield development shouldn't apply to urban sites within rural villages. So I think that was it. Was there anything more? Mrs. Burston, anything more? No. No. Okay. Anything else we've missed? From council, Mr. Coots? No.
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. Well, it is just gone 12 o'clock, so we've come to the end of the residential development and infrastructure session. So we'll Annette, do we need to leave this session and then rejoin for the afternoon session, or should we turn off cameras and mics at this stage and then rejoin at 2 o'clock?
To be honest, you can do either. Teams is very intuitive to whether it's the same invite and it will just let you straight back in. So whatever you're comfortable with your individual machine. And I don't know in sectors whether you still want to stick till 2 o'clock, because ultimately there's no disadvantage if we start earlier. It's just the people on the Teams call, and it will be uploaded all together in any event. So if you want a long lunch break, you know, it's there for you. If you wanted a shorter one and the council were agreeable.
Thank you. That's very true. So we could do it sooner. Mrs. Burston, what do you think?
Seeing as we haven't got many questions for this afternoon session, it might be better for everyone all round if we sort of started back at 1 o'clock, and then we could get it all done, and people would have a longer afternoon to get back to work and relax, having to not be faced with questions from us anymore. As long as that hour gave the council enough time for their discussions with their consultant regarding the map, etc.
Yeah, I think from our perspective that should be fine to come back for 1 p.m.
Okay, brilliant. Mr. Coote, thank you. I know you're not joining us this afternoon for the retail rates, the commercial rates session. So thank you very much for your contributions this morning. Been very helpful.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, no problems. Okay, so I think I'm thinking it's probably easiest then if we just turn cameras off and microphones off and join again at 1 o'clock. Right. Okay, see you then.
Sorry about that this morning, Nick, about having to stop everything, but it wouldn't let me snooze my update. So
Oh no, no problem. Yeah, it's this GYBC computer thing. Yeah,
It meant I could have a cup of coffee.
happens to us all.
I was just speaking with Middlesbrough over lunch, Simon, and they were saying that you were hoping you were done this morning, and look at you having to come back.
I think we've rattled through it this morning, actually.
Okay.
I think the Mr. Hayden's a very good inspector, actually. Keeps people under control and targeted. But he never lets me do my waffle. It's forever disappointed.
Yeah. Always worth a waffle, isn't it? And where else are you at the minute, Simon? Middlesbrough?
Middlesbrough, poor Wolverhampton had postponed until October or November.
Wow. Bless them.
Their inspector was ill. It was meant to be in October or November, and so that's been delayed a year. We've got Telford and Reeking next week.
Yeah, with Mike Warden.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing Castle Point with Mike Warden as well.
Okay. I've never been in front of him, I don't think.
Oh, he's lovely. He's really nice.
And at Decorum, where Mr. Hayden is at the moment, I thought I was going to be, and I've just been stood down.
Oh.
Or stood up. I rather feel as if I've been stood up, actually.
Yes. Dumped at the last thing. And what about Chelmsford? Are you doing that?
Yeah, we haven't got dates for Chelmsford yet, have we?
No, well, they haven't submitted, but I'm doing that. I went down and had meetings with them and sorted a few things out, but they're good to go, really. They just had to do that extra Reg 19, didn't they?
They did. And last time, did you do their last one?
No.
Last time, Grosvenor Estate turned up at every hearing with a QC, a junior, a solicitor, a surveyor and a planner, every single hearing. It was just painful. Everything took so long. They had to have their 2 pennies worth. Their site wasn't included. They wanted it included. Anyway, it's going to be included this time.
Yes, I know. I'm just going to let in the inspectors, so we'll... So Inspector Burston's in. I'm just waiting for Inspector Hayden to join us, and then we'll be ready for our 1 o'clock restart. Welcome back, Mr. Hayden. I think everybody's here now, so you're welcome to start at 1 o'clock. The recording's on.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for returning so promptly after our lunch break. So this afternoon session is all about retail development and then some general questions that we had regarding the CIL. So first of all, to the council, unless there's anything you wanted to raise following this morning's session before we move on. No, okay then. So my first question this afternoon relates to our MIQs 12 and 13, which relate to the viability evidence for retail development. So thank you very much for your responses to our MIQs. And overall, we're satisfied that the viability evidence for retail development that has been satisfied with the retail evidence of viability development that has been presented, get my words around the right way, that the assumptions and inputs are evidence from reliable sources, and that the evidence tested via the technical consultation had no objections raised to it. So accordingly, we have no further questions regarding those MIQs 12 and 13. So now moving on to our MIQs 14, 15 and 16. From reviewing the evidence presented to us, we consider that the CIL rates of £240 per square metre and £100 per square metre appear to be viable based on the analysis in Appendix 21 of the Local Plan Viability Assessment. However, taking all 4 tests into account, it would be helpful for us if you could take us through the figures presented in Appendix 21 for both the greenfield and the brownfield sites. So this is in order to explain why the council has proposed the above CIL rates when, for example, retail warehousing looks to be able to support as much as £150 per square metre CIL charge. So I know that's a bit of a long question, so if there's any elements of that you want me to repeat for you, I'm quite happy to. Otherwise, I'll ask the council or Mr. Drummond-Hay to come back to me.
I think I'm clear.
Okay, thank you.
How did we get to the rates that we were suggesting, or that we have suggested?
Yes.
I'm on page 259 of the viability study, Appendix 21 that you've just referred to, and I'm looking at the first table, which is for supermarkets and greenfield development. And I think this process follows through for all of them. So first of all, we calculated the residual the additional profit, and the additional profit is the amount over and above the benchmark land value. So residual value less the benchmark land value, what is left of the in the pot, and CIL can be paid out of that pot. And it's a useful indicator as to whether or not there's capacity for CIL. We then ran we calculated the residual value and compared the residual value to the benchmark value plus 30%. And for greenfield sites, that suggested we tested up to £300 per metre squared, and that suggested actually there was scope for CIL at over £400 per metre squared. However, based on the Norwich principle that CIL shouldn't be more than 25%, shouldn't cause land values to fall by more than 25%, that suggested that CIL, the maximum rate of CIL would be £280 per metre squared, and that is halfway along the bottom of that first table, where green goes to red under the two. It's green at £280 per metre squared, red at £300 per metre squared. We then thought about the fourth test, that CIL should only be a small proportion of the residual of the total development value, and that suggested that CIL, the maximum rate of CIL was £240 per metre squared. And that is a principle that we've applied across all the different typologies. So for the in Appendix 12, we only presented the viable sites. the only viable typologies. In the local plan viability study, we tested the secondary retail, which wasn't viable, so we didn't waste time doing the analysis for that and giving you an even longer report to wade your way through. If we turn on to the next page, 260, we've got the brownfield analysis, and that shows that in the EUV plus approach, there's scope for over £400 per metre squared in CIL. However, again, the limiting factor is CIL as a proportion of GDV, and that's £240 per metre squared. Now, it is relatively unusual to suggest the same rate for on brownfield sites and greenfield sites, but because of this test being a proportion of the development's value, the development value is the same on the greenfield sites and the brownfield sites, and as that's a limiting factor, you end up with the same figure on both. For retail warehouses, it was the same process. Would you like me to talk you through the figures on that, or?
Yes, please.
Yes. So for the retail warehouses, which is the second half of page 259 on the greenfield sites, that indicated £400, that they could again bear more than £400, but looking at the bottom two lines, CIL at more than £220 per metre squared would cause land values to fall by more than 25%, and CIL at more than £150 per metre squared would be more than 5% of development value. And on the next page, again, but the GDV is a percentage of the total, CIL as a percentage of GDV, again, is the constraining factor. So we have the same figure on greenfield and brownfield sites.
Thank you for that. So the second part of my question was regarding the warehousing, and I said, for example, retail warehousing looks to be able to support as much as £150 per square metre on the CIL charge. Why didn't you choose that higher figure?
I think we're just wondering if we've missed something there. I don't think the council's in a position now to up its rate to £150 per square metre for retail warehousing, but yeah, we were just following the evidence.
Oh, sorry, I think Mr.
mute.
Jonathan wants to come in, but he's on mute.
Yeah, that should have been £160 a metre squared for the retail, £150 a metre squared for the retail warehouse uses. I wonder why I haven't got an explanation as to why that.
Yeah, just on that point, I think for retail in the viability study under paragraph 11.18 to 11.20, the overall recommendations there do set out the rates for retail warehousing at £100 per square metre. So I think that is where that number is derived. But yes, whether that could be inflated, I mean, we might have to go away and have reflect on that a little bit.
Mr. Hayden, you mentioned earlier that the council wouldn't be in a position at the moment to inflate that figure. Do you want to come back?
No, and I think we're, well, you consulted on £100 per square metre. The only way that could be revisited is by carrying out another consultation on it. We're not really in a position to recommend that figure be increased without further consultation. So I think that would be the only, otherwise it would be unreasonable to interested parties who may have been satisfied with 100 but wouldn't be for 150. So that's fine. Well, I think we just wondered if there was we were missing something in the evidence. But if £150 per square metre is shown to be viable, then certainly 100 would.
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for signposting us to the retail study. We shall go back and have a look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. You Ms. Raggett, you referred us to a paragraph number. What was that again?
So it was 11.18 to 11.20. I think that might be reiterated, but that sort of sets the overall scope for CIL for the retail uses.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No explanation as to how we got to 100 from 150, but that's fine.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to raise anything before we move on to the next question?
I suspect, but I would have to check, that the £100 came from using a 3% threshold rather than a 5% threshold as being the proportion of CIL of GDV. So if one looks at the table from 159, about £100 per metre squared is the cut-off point on that. And I think I recall a discussion about whether or not it should be 3% or 5%. And generally we use 5%. And I think that's where the discrepancy came from. But the fact is that we're at 100 here.
Is there any reason why a 3% threshold rather than the 5% threshold was used?
No, not really. These, as you know, the CIL has evolved over the last 15 years. The tests have become increasingly sophisticated, complicated, in some cases overly complicated, and different inspectors take different views, and some councils have used 3%, some have used 5%, and I don't think there's a particularly hard and fast rule. It's not like the Norfolk precedent for what is the 25%. I couldn't point you towards a particular example like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen the proportion, the percentage of GDV used before. I wasn't aware there was a kind of set threshold above which with that, but yeah, it's a low percentage, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's helpful for us to know that, yeah, potentially 3%. It might have been that 3% was used in that case for retail warehousing, and I think you did say earlier the typical range was between 3 and 5%.
Absolutely.
So,
yes.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where strangely we're able to recommend a reduction in a rate if we don't think the evidence is there to support it. But for the reasons I've explained, if we were to recommend an increase in a rate, it would be denying interested parties the opportunity to comment on it. So that could only be done if the council decided to go back and do another consultation on it, which, yeah, it sounds like you're not rushing at.
Yeah, I'm happy to confirm that I don't think we'd be at this stage wanting to go back to consultation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I shall move on now then to my third question, which is regarding MIQ 17. So the modelling in the LPVA assumes that the CIL would be payable in full within the first year of development in all cases, in order to ensure that the instalments policy would not negatively impact developments with a CIL liability of more than £10,000. However, the instalments policy requires schemes with a liability of £10,000 or less would be required to pay in full within the first 6 months. Is this a reasonable approach, given that the LPVA has not tested for this?
So in the viability testing, we didn't just assume it was payable in a lump, but we did. Oh yeah, sorry, we did assume it was payable up front. Because that's the worst case scenario, and there have been quite a lot of cases where developers have failed to serve the correct notices at the right time, so that it is due at the beginning. My understanding, and I might be wrong, I'm a surveyor, not a planner, is that a local authority can introduce an instalment policy at any time, and it's not subject to the examination. Is that correct? And therefore, by having an instalment policy, the council is going above and beyond to ensure that the development can come forward from a practical point of view, rather than a strictly viability point of view. Certainly I welcome the fact that they have brought it in, or will be bringing it in, subject to your report, of course.
Thank you. That does clarify the situation for us. So we'll move on now then to my final question, which is regarding the MIQ 18 and your proposed modifications in respect of how the chargeable amount of CIL will be calculated and the application of vacant building credit. So we agree and can confirm that these modifications are necessary for legal compliance. However, there's no need for the council to provide a specific form of these words, as we can simply recommend these in our report and leave it to the council to make the necessary changes. Therefore, we have no further questions unless the council wanted to comment at all on their proposed modifications that they suggested. Nope. Okay, I shall ask Mr. Hayden then if he has any follow-up questions regarding what we've discussed this afternoon, and if he doesn't, to make some closing remarks.
Thank you. No, I didn't think I had any follow-up questions. No, I think we recognise that on that instalments policy that's not subject to examination. I think the point just was, yeah, to ensure the council was comfortable with a policy which sought payments of up to 10,000 from developments within the first year of development, when I think the viability appraisal had assumed, the viability appraisal assumes SIL will be payable in full within the first year. So actually, for anything above 10,000, obviously, it's allowing greater flexibility. For anything less than 10,000, I guess what you're saying is it's actually consistent with the instalments policy, because it's actually consistent with the viability appraisal, because you've tested assuming SIL would be payable within the first year. Yeah.
We actually assume that it'll be payable in the first 6 months within the appraisals.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So our model is based on a quarterly model. So it's quarterly cash flow, and SIL is in month. Well, in the second quarter. So it's
second quarter. That's for all sizes of all typologies. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That was short and sweet this afternoon. I think we recognised there weren't many. We didn't find many issues with the viability appraisal. Just those couple of things. So on retail rates. So thank you for all your contributions this morning and this afternoon. I think there's nothing else that we've discussed there that needs to be added to the action list as such. I think we've said we'll take away the suggested modifications to the wording, confirming compliance with confirming legal compliance. In respect of the chargeable amount of SIL and how that's calculated, and the application of vacant building credit. Yeah, those things. So we'll just take that away and no doubt come up with a recommendation which just recommends that be included. Strangely enough, with SIL examinations, our recommendations are not binding. It always seemed a bit daft to me, but anyway, there we go. There's probably challengeable if it's in our recommendations and you don't go along with it. So so I don't think there's any more actions from this morning. So just to confirm, we are likely to be recommending modifications in respect of applying a 0 SIL rate to flatted residential development, and also in respect of the explanation of how the SIL rate will be calculated, and also in respect of brownfield development, but that will be subject to your note on, a 0 rate on brownfield development. That'll be subject to your note on and the map showing the extent of the urban area that you think brownfield should apply to, the brownfield rate should apply to. So if you send that to us, we'll consider that as part of our report. So yeah, I think first things first, if we will take those away and consider them. If the council could just kind of give us an indication as to when you'd be able to get an action list to us so that we can check and turn that around, that would be helpful. And also, if in the action list you can give us a rough estimate of the timescale for getting the map and notes prepared, I think that would be helpful to us. So I think that was the only thing. Yeah, we're going to put your opening statement up online. So I think that was the only thing that you needed some time to put together. So yeah, if in the action list you could just confirm how long that'll take. In terms of our report, I mean, we won't be issuing the SIL examination report before we've issued the local planning examination report, just because it, one in a sense follows the other. So more than likely what we would do is issue the two together, actually. So yeah, and so therefore both will follow the main modifications process on the local plan. So I think just before we kind of close for today. It's not specifically related to the CIL examination, but it'd just be helpful for confirmation of your sort of expected timescales on the local plan main modifications. I think you have sent an email via Annette recently about that. Just be useful, I think, for us to know sort of when you expect consultation to end and when you might be able to get us a summary of representations to us, because that would just dictate when we're likely to focus on finishing off the report.
Yeah, thank you, inspectors. I can take that. So yes, we have indicated via Annette last couple of days that we'd like to try and get to my main modifications some point next week, hopefully next Wednesday. We're making that run for 7 weeks just to account for a bit of Easter holiday as well.
Okay.
And we expect that to then wrap up by about the 21st of April. I think, yeah, we can probably turn around summary of the main modifications responses quite relatively soon after that. So looking ahead, 21st of April, yeah, I think we can probably get everything turned around by the end of April in terms of everything you need for that perspective.
Okay. Okay. Okay, no, that's good. Obviously, we do start to write the report straight away, so we're on with that. But you know, we clearly need to wait until the end of the main MOS consultation and any representations from that. Yeah, that's fine. And just I'm not sure whether Annette's had time to respond back to you, but yeah, we will concentrate the rest of this week on just checking through the main mods, the updated set of main mods that you are about to send through. So we'll concentrate on checking that and checking through the updated sustainability appraisal and HRA as well. And if you've got any words to go on the website, again, we'll just have a look through those. So hopefully we can get that sorted by the end of the week to give you the best chance to get out to consultation next week.
Yes, thank you. I mean, we are looking just to still receive just confirmation from one participant over some wording, which I think we did talk about, but they were going to send something through early part of this week, so I'll chase that this afternoon. Outside of that, yeah, everything is basically ready to go. So hopefully we can send things your way end of today, either that or first thing tomorrow morning. So, that's fine. Yeah,
that's fine. Okay. Anything else, Mrs. Burston? Anything from your perspective?
No, nothing from me.
No. Annette, anything from you? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much. That concludes the CIL examination hearing. Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing the updated main mods and going on from there. So thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Mr. Fountain, you want to say something? Your hand is up.
Well, I was just going to extend my thanks to all the participants today. Mr. Coots obviously not here, Mr. Drummond-Hay, to Annette for super services, and to the inspectors. So thank you very much.
That's all right. It's a pleasure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.